players gather to represent powerful spells, some of the oldest and most powerful instants in the history of Magic the Gathering. High Tide, Predict, Flusterstorm, and many others. Battling head-to-head in passive-aggressive turn passing, they all have one thing in common: uphold their legacy and search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind BoshNRoll on YouTube, ThrabenU University, and theepicstorm.com.
All right, I probably have to stop here, otherwise we get like a DMCA copyright takedown notice. Welcome to episode 38 of the Eternal Glory podcast, Midrange Wars. I'm Phil Gallagher, joined as always by Bryant Cook and Brian Coval. How are you all doing tonight?
Phil, you sound so crisp. Did something change?
I think it's called puberty. It's weird.
I'm still waiting. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited for Midrange Wars because if we've learned anything from the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy and the prequel trilogy, the middle episode's always the best one.
That'll get some people fired up.
Actually, right. So we're continuing this joke. I didn't even mean to do this, but today is actually the anniversary of the release of The Last Jedi. And this morning, I retweeted like the Star Wars holocron thing that I follow, and I said happy birthday to the second best Star Wars movie. Feel free to debate in the comments. And then I turned off comments for the post. So because I don't want to hear it, it's a fact. It is second only to The Empire Strikes Back.
I'm a Rogue One person myself, but that's kind of a hot take, I suppose.
Rogue One would have been so much better. Spoiler alert. When the giant like wave is coming to murder them, instead of like hugging and kissing or whatever they do, if she just turns and goes, "I hated you the entire time," and then the light beam hits and murders them, I would have like stood up screaming like, "Hell yeah!" Like, you don't have to throw a romance story in that movie. We didn't need it.
Yeah, it's weird because I genuinely liked Rogue One as like both a movie consumer and as a Star Wars fan. One of my friends, I've mentioned him on the cast before. He's a movie critic, and I get a heavy dose of film Twitter just because I follow him as my friend in real life. And like critically, people hate Rogue One, which is weird because I liked it. I don't know. And like the only one like I think Solo actively sucks, and I think the last one, whatever it was called, actually sucks. Like the one that followed Last Jedi. It's a real shame that Last Jedi never got a sequel, to be honest, because that movie was really good.
So I love Solo just because I'm a huge Donald Glover fan. I understand that the movie like isn't that great. I didn't like, spoiler again, Darth Maul coming back, and I actually really liked the first like third of the movie, like the Han Solo backstory. Like that was amazing, like trying to get off the planet or whatever. And then like after that, the tone just changed completely. Like you could see the multiple director issue happening in real time.
So my big beef with Solo story was it was obviously a like fan servicey flip on The Last Jedi. And by fan service, I don't mean naked ladies, which is apparently a definition of that. Phil, you watch anime.
I would say that is, in fact, the most common definition.
Yes. So I don't mean naked ladies. I mean the whiny, trolly, basement-dwelling people who can't handle a good story in their Star Wars frame. Solo story was for them. So I enjoyed watching Solo. It was like plenty of Star Wars sights and sounds I could put in my eyes and ears, and I will always take as much of that as I can. But like, I don't remember what happened in the movie at all. Like, I just remember, like, what's your last name? I don't have anyone. Your name is Solo, then. Like that. And I was like, oh, that's fucking lame. But that's the only thing I remember from the entire movie. Maybe Chewbacca was in prison or something? Is that where they met? He was, like, farming mud?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Like, it was just not memorable beyond, like, the 2 hours of, like, elevated heart rate you get from watching lasers get shot.
So Maeve from Westworld and Woody Harrelson didn't carry it for you?
Oh,
That's a
Woody
shame.
Harrelson was in that movie, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Okay.
him.
I remember Woody. I love Woody. I like Donald Glover too. Like so there was a during like the first COVID shutdown back in March, my work was trying to get us engaged with each other from home, and they did like a spring scavenger hunt thing. And like in teams, they would send like a daily email like, your team has to send pictures of these objects by the end of the day to get points. And one of them was a replica of a musician. And I did not have like a Beethoven bust or anything around my house because I've never owned a piano, and you need a piano to put something like that on. But I did have a Billy D. Williams Lando action figure, and I did the like degrees of separation. I was like, okay, this isn't a musician, but Donald Glover is a musician, and he plays a younger version of this character, and I got the points.
Phil's just like, can we please stop talking about Star Wars? But no, Phil. Going back to fan service, and I don't mean naked ladies. The Mandalorian recently, I mean, I watch it every week, and I saw a bunch of people complaining on Twitter about like, we said we wanted Boba Fett, but we didn't actually want him. You shouldn't have given us what we wanted. You should have known better. No, then shut your mouth. Don't scream for 2 seasons that you want Boba Fett. They finally give him to you, and now you're going to complain it isn't what you wanted? Shut up.
Yeah, and I loved the like Star Wars meme that like one of the most beloved, most recognizable characters from the show, all he did was fly into the side of a boat and get eaten by a pit. Like he went out like a bitch and like never came back. And I kind of thought that was hilarious that the entire like lore, the entire mystique of Boba Fett was just like based on nothing. But now he is actually in the show. He's a recurring character and he's a badass. And I'm like, okay, like I like it, but I was fine leaving that alone.
This is what I get for making a Star Wars joke in the intro. So some of you are there for that. Some of you aren't there for that. Whatever. It's what you get. You're used to this bullshit in our intros by now, hopefully. So, Brian, what's going on in life?
Well, not a whole lot, I gotta be honest. I am still in COVID shutdown, and I don't remember where we were during the last update, but my work has been shut down for about a month and a half now, but they've moved from like, we're going to close for a week and a half. Okay, another week. Okay, another week. Now it's just, we're closed indefinitely. We'll let you know, which is, I enjoy the peace of mind of that, where I don't have to like stress that I'm going to get pulled back to work in this bullshit situation. But like, so that's cool. And I've been like, I'm going to talk about it in the Magic updates more, but I've just been using all of this home time to up my YouTube game.
I haven't noticed.
Yeah, right. We'll talk about that more. But so I've basically just been watching TV. Like Ashoka came back in The Mandalorian. We're back on Star Wars, Phil. Get fucked. So Ashoka showed up in The Mandalorian, which made me want to rewatch Rebels because the Mandalorian girl from Rebels is also in the Mandalorian show now. So I'm just like, Sabine. So I'm just like rewatching Rebels, which is perfect because it's a kid's show and like they're like 20-minute episodes once the commercials are cut out, and it's just like the perfect like, oh, it's lunchtime, I'll watch Rebels, rather than like what I'm used to watching, like where I'm locked in for a solid hour. So I'm rewatching Rebels. My girlfriend has been seeking out like romance thrillers for us to watch at night together. And I watched The Undoing, which was an HBO show. It starred Hugh Grant and Nicole Kidman. And it was actually like a pretty compelling murder mystery with some like psychological twists and stuff. I like that a lot. It was a 6-episode miniseries, totally doable. I'm currently finishing The Flight Attendant, which is Penny from Big Bang Theory's new show. She stars in it, and basically she's just like this absolute disaster, like drunken party maniac flight attendant who wakes up in bed next to a dead guy with his throat cut one morning in Bangkok. Yeah, and instead of like calling the police, she like cleans the crime scene, runs away, flies back to America, and then like while facing all her own alcoholism and family problems, she's also just solving this like international crime ring, like breaking an international crime ring while being chased by the FBI also, it's kind of stupid. Like I kind of have a problem with like broken premises like that. Like I love sci-fi. So like sci-fi, the deal is, okay, these things are true and we take that to be fact. Now in this new frame, these things are all reasonable. Like that's cool. But I think it is unreasonable that in like the real world, this barely functional alcoholic who can barely hold a job is like solving crime. And like, I don't know. That pulled me right out of it.
The first third of that was the plot of The Night Of. And then you were like, and then she flew home and was solving the crime while being chased by the FBI. Everything before that was the exact plot of The Night Of.
Yeah. Yep. And it's great because I've mentioned on the cast before that I listened to Conan O'Brien's podcast, and Kaylee Cuoco, is that her name? Kaylee Cuoco?
I think so.
Plays Penny. Yeah, she was on Conan's show this week, and she's his podcast guest this week, and I am so sick of her. That's all I have to say.
How about you, Phil? What have you been up to?
Well, magic mostly, but we'll talk about that part later. Basically right now, I'm 2.5 days away from winter break, and I need it. Like, today was a day where it's like, okay, maybe I'll draft after work, and then I just took an exhaustion nap for like 2 hours, and that's just what I needed instead. Work is really tiring right now because, like, there's always changing sets of expectations and plans are changing all the time. Like, again, I love my job. I love my admin team. But every few days, it's like, okay, here's what we're thinking about now. Here's what we're going to try now. And, like, now we're talking about a 2-week, like, mandatory quarantine for everyone after winter break just to, like, make sure that the kids aren't spreading everything after going. Because, like, I have kids going to Disney World right now. And that should tell you something about where some of the students are at in terms of, like, pandemic consciousness. They're like, ooh, I can do this exciting thing. I can't do anything right now. This is great. Rather than, like, this is a bad idea and I could endanger the lives of my fellow classmates, teachers, and all their extended families. So, it's gotten tiring, but, like, with vaccine stuff, you know, imminent, I'm hopeful for a return to normalcy for next school year. All right, Bryant, I know you've done some actual real life stuff, so let's flip it to you.
Well, I'm going to be doing like an adult thing this week. I am getting married on Friday. We were supposed to get married back in June, and that got postponed to COVID. And we decided that, like, we don't really want to put it off much longer, so we're just going to do a pretty simple, like, small ceremony thing, go to the courthouse to make it official, and then later on have a reception party, whatever.
Congrats. I mean, it's awesome to at least make it official, and, you know, you can have a hell of a rager once this is all over.
Yeah. Honestly, part of it's just, like, I pay so much every month in healthcare, and I only get, like, partial coverage, where my better half works for the state, and she gets 100% coverage for way less. So it's also just, like, the smart thing to do financially.
Oh, yep. Yeah, you should have married her years ago. Just fire it in.
I waited too long. We've been together 5 years. Like, week 3, I should have hopped on that.
Yeah. Actually, since that came up, like, my girlfriend right now, we work together, and we have health insurance. It's not great, but we have it. But she just had an interview with a company that is still, like, it's a new company still trying to get benefits sorted out. So if she takes the job, she'd have to get her own health insurance for a little while. And, like, the idea of just getting married so she doesn't have to did occur to me. Like, we're basically there anyway. What the fuck? So, yeah. And I hate weddings, and COVID would be the perfect excuse not to have one.
I hear you there.
I'm so on board with this scheme.
So, I don't know, like, Brian, you're of a similar age. Phil, I think you're a little bit younger, but we've been rewatching Master of None. We actually just finished it last night, and the first season of Master of None comes out in, like, 2013, and then the second season is 2015. And when she mentioned rewatching Master of None, I'm like, I remember that show. And then we sat down and rewatched the first episode. I'm like, I'm losing my mind. I only remember like bits and pieces. And then we would rewatch episode after episode. I'm like, no, I just don't remember a ton of this. Like I remember the overarching like theme of the season, but like entire episodes I would forget. And I'm just like, I remember my deck list from 2004, but I can't remember like a TV show I watched a couple of years ago.
Well, our brains save the things that are important. Like, if there's something important about a show, like as we just determined, like I know all sorts of Star Wars shit I can fire out from my childhood, but like I also watched Master of None. I think he was in Italy for a little while. He learned how to make pasta. He hung out with Busta Rhymes at one point.
That is true. Who
gave him the advice, don't play the race card, charge it to the race card, which, although I am white, I really appreciate how clever that is. Like, I remember certain things that are worth remembering from the show, but no, I don't remember everything, and I don't have a problem with that. I'm going to forget this fucking flight attendant as soon as I'm done watching it.
Like, well, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, yep.
So we'll get to it in a tiny bit, but I played on the, I'm going to use air quotes, that invisible air quotes for the audience, but the Pro Tour. And while doing so, I did an office remodel and I was also recording. I decided that like, I'm not going to gain anything by uploading these to YouTube. Like they're really just for me. And I'm going to rewatch them at some point in the future. But like, I don't want people to be like, oh, well, if you did this, you could have done this. But like, I'm never going to play this format again. So that doesn't help me. Like, I just want to rewatch this one day when I want to reminisce about like, my event. So, but in between, I'm painting my office closet. So I was literally like stripping down to my boxers painting. I'd be like, oh crap, warning, rounds up, put my clothes back on, turn the lights back on, start recording. And I did that every round until it was done being painted. And then when it dried, I put in like new like shelving and stuff.
So basically, we don't know whether or not Bryant was wearing pants for those videos. All right. That's awesome.
I was wearing pants.
Yeah, you might say that, but I don't know.
Yeah, like, I don't care. I'm kind of disappointed if you were wearing pants. Like, I can see you on camera right now. It's like from the pecs up. Like, you could have a halter top on and be completely nude under that. And it's totally fine. The Mets cap is distracting us all.
And the last thing I wanted to mention for my personal life update, I don't know if either of you two have pets, but I have a dog. And every year for the holidays, I get my dog actual cow femur bones. Last year, I got him 2 bones for $20 from like the flea market, but due to COVID, obviously can't go to a flea market. I doubt it's even open. But so I was looking online and I bought one and it was $25 for a single one. I was like, oh man, I feel like I got ripped off. But then it arrived. The ones last year were like 12 inches and had a little bit of meat on them. This one is like 18 inches big and has meat all over it. And I'm just like, my dog is going to go to town. And when we opened up the package, we saw his eyes pop out and we're just like, we need to hide this. Like, you're going to wait just like we are. But like, I'm so excited to give him this bone.
Nice. Yeah, my parents have had a series of dogs over the last 10, 15 years or so. And we do go to the local butcher shop. If you ever need animal bones, they got a lot of them there. That's kind of what they do. And we would go to the local butcher shop and just be like, what kind of safe, appropriately sized bones do you have? And we would get like some cow stuff or whatever. And yeah, that's a great gift for a dog.
All right, let's go ahead and transition into donations then. As a generic thank you, last episode was awesome in terms of support. People absolutely loved it. We were tangent-filled, but the people loved it. So thank you very much to Matthew Hackbert, Philip Trivia, Alex Dubose, and Jadim, as well as Henrik Korkutz. Thank you all for the support, especially Matthew and Philip. Their donations were quite large, and we definitely felt the love.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so let's talk feedback now.
I think the first one's directed at you, Phil, so I'll let you take that one away.
It is.
I'll read it to cue Phil up, and then he can answer it like it's a real conversation. I think that sounds fun. All right. I really enjoyed this episode. I'd love to hear more about what fundamentals Phil's felt he's worked on since grinding more limited and draft. I'm sure it's little things like reading the board and really understanding when to attack, block, etc. But I would love what is this? Is this a nerd
Explain
thing?
it like I'm 5.
Oh, explain it like I'm 5. It's a Reddit thing. So an explain it like I'm 5 type breakdown. That's from, is that just Doug? Or
Dukes.
Dukes? Do you
Dukes
actually
on
say
Twitch?
Dukes?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I worry because one time I was judging an event with a Canadian who had an S at the end of his name, and I was just pronouncing the S the whole time. It was like Roberts or something, and like the whole team called him Roberts the whole weekend. And at the end of the weekend, he's like, "It's just Robert," and we're like, "Well, then why is there an S?" It's like, because it's French. I'm like, oh, sorry.
This is one of my constant fears. Like, I know just enough about language to be, like, dangerous, and every time a word looks vaguely French, I'm always like, ooh, is it French or is it not French? Do I pronounce this X? Tough.
Yeah. Is that last name Perret or Perez or neither?
So the kids, they would say Eli 5 for explain it like I'm 5. I only know that from younger people, but yeah, Eli 5.
I have heard that phrase before. I've never seen it abbreviated as such, and definitely never heard the phrase said out loud, like the abbreviation said out loud.
All right, well, I'm the young in here. All right. So, if I were to try to answer this succinctly and not in like a huge tutorial video type way, at a macro level, the thing that I've improved on the most is just parsing information both during drafts and during games. You really don't realize how much stuff you're missing and just like active information that's there for you until you learn more and you realize what you were leaving on the table before. So here's a really common example that I see now that I might not have seen 2 or 3 months ago whenever I started doing limited. So it's pick 2. You look at the pack. There's 3 okay uncommons. Let's say they were like all multicolored or something like that, and an okay rare. What common did your opponent take over like an okay rare and 3 okay but multicolored, uncommons? And if you think about, like, let's say we're working with the current Kaladesh Remastered set, you might be thinking, all right, you picked up a Thriving Rhino or an Aether Chaser. Those are probably the 2 most likely cards that you might be taking over uncommons and rares, because green and red are so good, and those are just, like, heavy signal cards. And before you know a set well enough and you've dug into it enough to realize that sort of stuff, you just go, they took a common. Or maybe you don't even process that, and it didn't occur to you that to like check the count of like rares versus uncommons versus commons that are in the pack. And there's a lot of that sort of stuff that you don't realize until you've put the work in. And the same goes with like combat tricks. Your opponent makes a weird attack in. If you're a novice, you go, they probably have something. And if you're experienced, you go, I think they probably have the +3/+3 1 red instant spell here based on this attack, and I can try to play around it.
Yep, that sounds exactly right. Like level 0 is like, oh, my brick person next to me passed a rare, dummy. Then you slam the rare, but like that's so wrong. And then like transitioning that skill to constructed, if my Death and Taxes opponent keeps 7 and goes Plains Go, I am like, okay, they have Thalia, or they have Stoneforge Mystic, like depending on the matchup. But like Plains Go from Death and Taxes, they don't want to do that most of the time on turn 1 off a 7-card hand. So like deducing information from what's not there is a skill that should be getting used and constructed all the time.
As far as more specifics go, most of my research and learning came from the Limited Resources podcast, and they have such amazing episodes on fundamentals that I would rather just add their content than produce my own. Like, LSV is so much better at Limited than I am ever going to be, and same for people like Ben Stark, that I should just defer to their judgment. So I am going to rattle off a list, and this is more so that you can come back to it later. Someone on Twitter, maybe Zoller, it's a J and a Z next to each other, so that's a little tricky, sent me a list of all the episodes that I should listen to. So for Limited Resources, I recommend 273, 288, 558, 290, 296, 312, 314, 325, 335, 367, 375, 462, 470, and I'd add 573. I don't know. That'll probably give you like 15, 20 hours worth of listening. That's a good beginning crash course in limited. That's kind of the extent of research that I was doing, if that gives you any idea of like the work that I put into this. So you can dig deep. There's a lot there.
Yeah,
I would also recommend 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42.
I think Brian's just saying random numbers right now.
Those
I don't
are the
think they're
numbers from
randoms.
Lost.
So I was on an episode of Limited Resources once, not as a guest, but as a genius or grifter section. If you're not familiar, Limited Resources does this thing called genius or grifter, where they propose a situation and they determine if that person is brilliantly manipulating a situation to their advantage or if they're just stone cold cheating or stealing. And I got a split decision. Luis said I was a genius and Marshall said I was a grifter. But it was Marshall. Luis challenged him, and Marshall, it was more like, I just don't want to have to think about that when I'm playing, than it was actually wrong. So, whatever episode that is, listen to that one too.
All right. So the next comment is really sort of a threefold point from Method Belly. I'm here for the show made of intro for sure. Well, good, because, you know, the first half an hour or so is certainly that these days.
And sometimes the first hour and a half, like last week.
Last week was a very special episode. It was hella fun for us. All right, middle point. Given that Legacy and Vintage can be a bit cyclical, I would support bringing in discussions of Historic as long as it's something you guys are getting worthwhile experiences out of.
I don't want to play any more Historic. Or talk about Historic.
So if you like Historic, I did a series this week. I think the first 5 will have aired by the time this time is out, where I tested out a whole bunch of the Historic decks for just like little half an hour snippets, and that was a lot of fun. Right now I'm kind of playing Historic as a way to do my various daily events on Arena, and it's fun. It's not nearly as deep as Legacy or Vintage, so while we might like make references to Historic from time to time, I don't know that we're going to be like gung-ho, this is the Historic episode, until we have a darn good reason to be playing Historic.
Yeah, I probably won't play Historic again unless I qualify for the Pro Tour again. I like clearing my arena quests with it, but that's about it. Like Historic, if anyone remembers Classic on Magic Online, it was like before Vintage was supported. It was just sort of like, these are the cards available on the Magic Online card pool, go ahead and play them. And it was like its own thing. It had an identity, but it was kind of stupid and only applied to that one place. Historic is the Classic of Pioneer. Like, Arena's working its way back to support Pioneer, and right now it's just like this, it's in its awkward teen phase, and the format's not super interesting.
Another issue that is it's just so hard to switch decks when you're playing Historic. The only reason I was able to like record a whole bunch of short videos featuring Historic was because there was an all access event where I could try all sorts of things, and that lasted for less than 48 hours, and I jammed 7 videos into that time frame.
I played so much Arena grinding for the Pro Tour, and by the time I was done, I had like 14 rare wilds. I had like 30 something mythics, and then like infinite common, uncommon. But like getting rare, what are the I call
wild cards?
Okay, wild cards is so difficult. And then the Historic deck that I played was almost all rares. Like I would have to dump so much money in order to buy that deck, and I don't want to spend $300 on a Historic deck for a platform I don't really play.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, but Arena rewards showing up consistently more than it does particularly winning or playing well. Like clearing your daily quests, getting your daily gold, drafting every set as it comes out. Like that's how you build your collection. If you just try to show up and buy packs and shred them for wild cards, it's pretty expensive to get into. And yeah, they need some sort of dusting system. Like every other virtual card game, digital card game, has some way to turn commons into rares or turn rares down into commons, like some sort of system. And the locked rarity wild cards are a huge problem.
All right. So thanks, guys, for another fun listen. There are certainly some detours in there. I disagree. On that note, if you happen to have some timestamps, it's immensely helpful when listening on a lunch break from Justice is Expensive on Reddit. I'm going to die on this hill. I appreciate your feedback. It's too time intensive, and to be honest, we have enough going on. I understand the request for timestamps, I really do, but I'm not going to do it. These guys are also busy, so if someone wants to step up and listen to our episode in advance and make timestamps, I won't stop you, but it's not going to be me.
All right, there was one more.
I just want to add a little bit to that point. Like I'm not trying to like be rude to the request of timestamps. If you just want to hear about Hull Breacher, I guess that makes sense to ask for. But if you think about that, Phil, Bryant, and I sit down for 2 hours every 2 weeks, plus like planning time. We pay money to get this thing edited. Like this is not free for us to just put out. And like this is our format. Like this is our content. This is our like art. I mean, like whatever art there is to three guys goofing off for an hour and a half while you wait for us to talk about Hull Breacher. But like, every one of us has individual content where we just dig right into the meat of Magic the Gathering. The podcast is where we get to hang out and talk about everything peripheral to it, like wherever it goes. So like, that is the point of the podcast. You could go read an article about Hull Breacher if you want to. I have several Hull Breacher centric lists posted on my YouTube, but you can dig right in. But this is for us to hang out, and I hope that people at home when they listen feel like they're hanging out too. So just want to put that out there. And the idea that I would put in extra work so you can skip that aspect of the podcast, which is to me is the whole point of the podcast. Like, nah, I'm off it.
All right, there was one more comment from Method Belly that I want to go back to.
My bad.
It's okay. I do have one question for Phil since he's been sinking time into Limited. Wow, I'm glad that people are actually following that. That's cool. I do want to get better at drafting, but I struggle to muster enthusiasm sometimes to draft standard sets. I tend to find myself fairly unexcited by almost all the cards on offer after the first few picks, since I'm so conditioned as a constructed player in terms of power level evaluation, which I freely admit is a fault of my own. So what's the most fun you've been having drafting lately, and where would you say the excitement is for you? If you're not familiar with it already, I recommend familiarizing yourself with Ben Stark's Drafting the Hard Way. There's a limited resources episode on it, or I think there's 2 or 3 articles that you can find very easily on the topic. The 10-second version is essentially learning to stay open a little bit longer, and reading the draft is critical to your success. It's really more complicated than that, but that's kind of the gist of it. And learning to draft the hard way and learning to read those signals and getting rewarded for it, even if it means taking some risks and having potentially a weaker draft deck overall, is really cool. And it feels so rewarding. Like, you might pick like a bomb rare pack 1 and then another on color card pack 2. And a lot of players would just force it at that point. But if you learn to read the draft and then you go like, hey, this has really dried up, but this color is completely open, no one's drafting it at the table, and then you get rewarded 2 packs in a row and you end up with this just stellar deck. Every time that happens, I'm just like mentally fist pumping and going like, yes, I did this one right. I didn't fall into traps. And that's really fun. The other thing I think is really cool about Limited is that the games are so unique. You know, you sit down for a match of Death and Taxes versus Snow, you roughly know what's going to happen, what turns are most critical, you know, what cards your opponent has and all that stuff, and it gets kind of samey after a while. But in Limited, the situations are so novel, and every time you draft, you just run into these situations you've never had before, where cards that are normally crap are all of a sudden crazy for your like very niche deck plan, or like you run into these really neat combat math situations. If you start looking for things and you start looking a little more closely at what's going on, there's a lot of fun to be had and a lot of intellectual intrigue.
Yeah, I accidentally talked about this a little bit already when I said just slamming the rare is the level 0 draft play. Sorry, Method Belly, didn't mean to call you level 0. But what you're describing is like the bomb rares, the exciting uncommons dry up. Like, yeah, that's the draft. And to add to what Phil's saying, like, even if there is a rare in the pack, those packs where you're like, this rare is pretty good, but I know blue isn't great in this format, I'm going to take Burst Lightning over Sphinx of Jwar Isle. Like that's a high. That's like, it gets you high. Like the adrenaline gets pumping. You're like, I know something that is so Galaxy Brain. Like a 5/5 flying Shroud. That like that card is a draft bomb. But in the context of, Zendikar, I think that's the format I'm talking about. Like Burst Lightning is just the cat's ass. Like your opponent's going to be dead before they cast their 6-mana flying creature. Like, and just knowing that sort of stuff, living like in that dialed in specific skill set, and every set that comes out, you have to rebuild that skill set because like compare that to like Dominaria, like those 2-color 5 and 6 drops are going to dominate the game. Dominaria, you have to plan, you have to know every card in your deck, and you have to like plan for like, okay, there's 7 cards left in my deck. If I draw the like Teferi or whatever, with at least 2 cards left, I can't win. I can't lose this game. If there's 1 or fewer cards, I can't win this game. How can I plan for that? Like that sort of stuff, like the mastermind stuff. At Pro Tour Phoenix this past year, the last Pro Tour that was allowed to be live, I teamed with Paul Rietzel in testing, and we both 3-0'd our first pods. And Paul told me about this crazy game. It was Theros Beyond Limited, where he realized he couldn't get through his opponent's defenses. He had no way to win the game through combat, but he had 1 Grey Merchant of Asphodel in his deck, and he had 1 Minions Return, which is an aura with flash, which is when enchanted creature dies, return it to the battlefield. And he had to plan the entire game, starting on like turn 3 or 4, around getting enough black mana symbols into play to Grey Merchant his opponent, and then flash in Minions Return to do it again, to get 20 points. And he just made that plan from turn 3, and he won his match. And like, that's the kind of shit that is like so cool to be able to figure out and then execute. Like, love it. There's not really anything in Constructed that compares to that, because like you can map that out at home. You're like, all right, if Death and Taxes has like Deafening Silence and Thalia and Sanctum Prelate in play, what sequence do I need to win that game? And you can map that out, but you can't map out a limited game like that. I just got really excited and talked for a long time. But
no, that was really
good. It's
good.
a good topic.
Like, that's one of those examples where, like, afterwards, after you do something like that, you just, like, want to sit back, like, and do whatever it is you do to mentally reward yourself. Like, have a beer, have a smoke, like, whatever it is. It's just like, damn, that was good for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's like one of those hero moments that like, I'm glad there were people around that he could tell that story to, because like sometimes you have those and you're just alone in your house and you're on Magic Online and you're like, no one will ever know what a genius I just was. And even your opponent might think like, oh, that was so lucky, but they don't realize you've been planning it for 14 turns. Like those moments, they happen in Limited way more than they happen in Constructed.
Yeah, you totally get to make your own luck. It's unreal.
Mm-hmm. All right, what did Michael Mapson have to say? I want you 3 to know I'm really mad at you for teaching me about Cameo, because now I really want to throw money at it, even though I know I shouldn't. So, a famous psychiatrist once said, when you say should, you should all over everyone. So, should is not a word that people want to be using. It just assumes that there's a right and a wrong in this chaotic life. And you should stop shooting on yourself and just embrace it. Whoever you want to hang out with, whether it's MC Bat Commander or Dwayne The Rock Johnson, if that's in your budget, pursue that. Live your life.
All right. So let's go into MTG updates. And the first thing I should do here is probably just talk about a meeting that the 3 of us had. So last Tuesday, we all sat down to like really talk shop, nitty gritty stuff, video quality, audio quality, all that sort of stuff. Like, I identified a video problem that all 3 of our videos were having, and Bryant was able to fix it. And we did a lot of stuff like that with back and forth. So you should be noticing significant improvements on all of our content moving forward.
Yep, that was a big deal. I'd had a few like random people ask if they could get my YouTube content in 1080p, and I didn't even know I was in charge of that. I thought that was a YouTube side thing. I'm like, I'm recording in 1080. Like, I don't know what else I can do. But Phil identified, or I think it was Phil identified something.
I ID'd it, but Bryant figured out how to fix it.
Yeah, Phil like defined the problem, and then that gave Bryant the definition he needed to solve it. And like, so I realized I was recording in 1080p, and YouTube offers 1080p, but my recording software, or my editing software in between, was knocking it down to 720. And then I resolved that starting this week. Should be a couple days of 1080p videos available now on my channel. The comments went wild. Like, the first day it went up, so many people were like, yeah, 1080p. And I was like, I didn't even know people noticed or cared about this. Sorry. But yeah, that was great.
Yeah, it was one of those things. I didn't know what I was leaving on the table until like I saw what could be better. Like, just like what we were just talking about in Limited. Like, now that I know, I feel like an idiot for not making this change earlier, like literally years ago.
Yeah, during the meeting, Phil was like, everybody right now take like 30 seconds to go watch part of a Saffron Olive video, just like something on MTG Goldfish. Just look at how his cards look compared to how our cards look. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done?
The funny thing, it was literally one click. Literally one click. And I doubled my image quality.
So what I got out of this meeting was something a little different from the other two. I'm usually fairly good at like the technical stuff, but for strategy, Brian helped me out a lot. I've had this naming convention for my videos since 2017, where it's always what format, what I'm playing. So either a league or a challenge, followed by the date, and then a slash, and then the round number, what deck I'm facing, and my opponent's name, and all this stuff. But like, that's not good for the YouTube algorithm, and Brian just helped me clean that up a lot. And then Brian gave some information about like best ways of getting your stuff into the algorithm. Phil introduced me to tagging my stuff, and it was just very insightful. And a lot of that is what I really appreciated out of that call.
So for anyone who hasn't heard us say something like this before, anytime you're trying to get better at something, pair yourself with someone who's better than you. So like Brian, and I all have like different strengths in terms of content creation, and getting the 3 of us together at the same time to just talk shop was so helpful. Shout outs to other people in the community who helped. Julian gave me a lot of great advice. He's the one who recommended the new microphone that I now have. And I know Min has helped me out, and I think he helped you out as well, Brian.
Yeah, Min was great. I had this weird audio issue that somebody commented that like my audio was intermittently cracking, and I didn't hear it. I posted on Twitter, like, does anyone else hear this? And most people said no, but Min and Julian said yes. And like this person said they couldn't even listen to my content because of it. And I was like, what is happening here? And it turned out that it's just like a physical auditory sensitivity that this person and Min could pick up. And Julian, because he was listening for it, could hear it. Me even just like dialing in as close as I could. Like, I had my thing at max volume, like clutching my noise canceling headphones to my ear. Like, I couldn't hear it at all. But we just identified that this like weird thing was happening. And then Min helped me navigate how to fix it. And it turned out the cracking was my breath leaving my mouth on like certain like P and B sounds, like sounds that force air out of your face quickly, and just like adjusting how my microphone was set up, like actually lowering the quality of my mic so it wouldn't catch that quite so harshly was all it took. And I would have never in my life figured that out, but Min helped walk me through all the steps to troubleshoot it. So shout out to Min. He did not have to do that.
Yeah, he has literally spent over an hour helping me troubleshoot some things in the past. Like, his his stuff on MinMax blog is really great, but he is also just like such a delightful human being to work with.
Agreed.
I saw him post yesterday about like a tech issue that he's spent like 5 or 6 months trying to solve, and it turned out it was just like a loose wire. And like that's the kind of thing that I feel so hard. Like he is obviously so smart, knows his tech stuff, but like he just forgot to unplug it and blow in it. Like we all learned, that's what you do first, right? Just blow in it, see if it'll work before you go changing any hardware.
What is this, a Super Nintendo?
Everything's a Super Nintendo. When you're in your 30s plus, if you were a 90s kid, I mean, do you guys not do that? Do you not like blow in electronics if they're not working? Because I always do. The quiet laughter means that I'm alone here.
It's okay.
I mean, I definitely did it as a kid.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of hits a lot of our biggest MTG updates. So let's just kind of hit any other highlights we missed. So on my end, I just recorded a Shops video with David Lance, aka Static Gripped, who won one of the 3 Eternal Weekend Vintage events. So I'm super excited about that. It was a lot of fun. That should be live by the time you all are getting this podcast. I also played a very silly, like, Chains of Mephistopheles Hull Breacher Wheel and Deal list that was looking to mind twist the opponent while cantripping. That was very fun. All right, Bryant, what about you?
So I played on the Pro Tour, and I played Blue-Black Rogues in Standard and Mardu Vehicles in Historic. I didn't really see any Historic decks that I liked, and then Jarvis recommended Mardu Vehicles because it was like up my alley, and I played it in Standard when it was out. The deck just felt like a little underpowered. The Jun Sacrifice deck and the 4-color midrange deck just like ran all over me. I beat every deck that wasn't those two, but like it wasn't even close when I played those decks. Like they were like, "Why are you here? I'm just gonna smush your face and move on." And that's what happened. Finished 81st overall. Made day 2. I guess that's not that bad. I got some money out of it, but a little I'm glad I made day 2. I just wish I did better. I think we all can understand that. And then I missed the Legacy Showcase. I was like awake and I was ready, but I opened Magic Online and it took 8 minutes to update. And by the time I was able to log into Magic Online, the event had already started. I don't know about YouTube. Maybe our listeners can tell us, but is there any sort of like rhyme or reason with the times that the showcases are? It used to be 11:05, and then this one was 11. Like, how does Magic Online decide what events to push back 5 minutes?
Didn't you also miss an Eternal Weekend event because you just like didn't show up in time?
No, I made all of those. There was one I almost missed.
Oh, okay. Have you considered building in a little cushion? Just like a little bit, like show up 20 minutes early instead of 5?
I mean, I could. I also don't expect Magic Online to take half a century to update.
Oh God, I do.
Are you new here? like I know you've played Magic Online before.
Like,
yeah,
at least once a week, I'm expecting Magic Online to push me back by 5 minutes between, like, updating. And then after it updates, half the time it wants you to restart again. Like, oh, we just got this new update, but you have to restart if you want to look at the pretty images.
Yes, it's been loaded up, but we need to start with it already loaded up. Oh, cool. Neat. Why?
Yeah.
Sure.
Lovely program.
Yep.
I recorded a Pioneer video and Legacy Challenge videos on the YouTube. Go check those out. And like the other guys, I updated some of the stuff on YouTube. Go check that out. And the big thing is, tends to be the largest viewed thing on the Epic Storm every year. The annual deck showcases where I scan my decks and upload them. That will be released on Monday. So keep a lookout for those. There's a good idea. Someone posted to Twitter about other Legacy community members also sharing their personal projects around the holidays, because I do it every year around this time. It's just like what I do. So if anyone else would like to share their pimped out decks, their cool looking decks, whatever they do, to Twitter, I think it'd be a fun thing to do around the holidays.
So Brian, how about you? I know you've taken up doing donation deck lists and you've got daily videos on the channel now. How's that all going?
It's pretty exciting. Because of that I'm releasing videos every weekday at 10 a.m. for the foreseeable future. As long as I'm still in quarantine and don't have to go to my actual job, I'm going to be keeping up that pace. And I'm scheduled through Christmas at this point. It's currently a week and a half before Christmas when we're recording, which is like both liberating and terrifying. Because like on the one side, it's like, wow, I can just take the day off. Like today, I didn't record a video, and that's fine. I'm covered for a week and a half still. But at the same time, yesterday I realized that when I switched to 1080p quality, my editor shrunk the size, the like maximum field size of the video. So if you watch Monday's video, my blue-white energy field deck, if you full screen it, it doesn't actually go full screen. It's 1080p, but it's small. And so, but because I was scheduled so far out, I had like 7 videos in the queue that were already like that. And I had to like frantically, like you can't make real-time corrections. Like the ship takes a little while to turn in the right direction. So I re-edited some of the videos that I could, and other ones I just couldn't. Like I delete like my source files pretty quickly after I finalize the product and upload it. So I was able to salvage some from my recycle bin, but some of them are just going to be smaller. So there's like some growing pains there. Donation deck lists are a blast, though. I know that's like a huge part of Phil's content model, but I just got into it. I love playing these decks that people just pull out of nowhere, and I'm surprised. Like I would have never played Mono Black Infect in Modern, but I have that video coming out next week, and it was actually fun and kind of good. I can see how it would win.
Can I pause you for a second, Brian?
Yeah.
I randomly played a Modern League yesterday, and I was looking at the numbers. They have 1,300 active players. Pioneer has like 180, and Legacy's like somewhere in the 500s right now. For how bad of a format everyone says that Modern is on Twitter and how unenjoyable the format is, my personal experience is somewhat aligned with that. People love that format, and it's still the most played format by far. So it just seems so weird to me that even though people complain about it all the time online, that it's still by far the most played format.
I think it's the eternal format for a new generation. Like, if you're a newer player, it's hard to get into Legacy, but you might have the cards that allow you to breach into Modern and realistically switch around decks there. Like, the barrier to entry is lower, and it's a better play experience. Well, normally I would say it's a better play experience than a lot of other things like Standard. So, like, I 100% understand the appeal from that perspective.
Yeah, Modern has been the most popular constructed format since its inception, and that hasn't changed. Like, Legacy is great, but the financial barrier is real. Pioneer, I'm afraid, is settling into where Extended used to be, where people would be like, oh, Extended is the best format. It's so much fun. There's so many decks, and like they're all like pretty similar. Like the top tier is really deep. Like, when do you play Extended? During PTQ season. And that's it. Like, for 9 months of the year, nobody touched Extended. And this was like 8-year Extended. Like Fetchland, Shockland, mana bases, and like Mind's Desire was legal, and Dredge and Affinity and Countertop. Like those were all decks in Extended, and that format was fucking fire, but nobody touched it if they didn't have to. And I feel like Pioneer is settling into that space right now. It kind of got burnt. Like its fledgling year got cut in half, so didn't really get the momentum. But yeah, Modern is just, and I'm not dialed into Modern Twitter apparently, because I don't really see people complaining about Modern, and I've had fun every time I dip my toes in it. Like I think that there's just like a strong stable of aggro decks, and then a strong stable of mid-range decks, a couple of combo decks. I did a blue-white control donation league that deck felt like it was just half a step too slow against everything. Like, just doesn't keep up with Uro, isn't fast enough to brick the aggro decks. Like, maybe if you're trying to play blue-white control, you'll be sad, but everything else I've done seems pretty cool.
I think Pioneer's going to pick up really fast once it hits Arena. I feel like Magic Online might not be the right place for it, just because I feel like Pioneer's still, like, Standard was never super popular on Magic Online either, but I feel like once it hits Arena, it's going to really take off, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's probably true. So my next thing that I'm working on is what other kinds of videos I can put on YouTube other than full league walkthroughs. And You brought up your deck showcase, which is something I've been thinking about. Like a series that I'm thinking of calling like Show and Tell. Of just like Rich Shea used to do that on his stream. He would be like, okay, well, guys, it's time for some show and tell. And then he would go pull out like his set binder of Arabian Nights and just tell like the actual Arabian Nights story behind a card's like top-down design. So like Rich used to do that, and I thought it was cool. And like I have some cool stuff. I've been playing for over 20 years at this point and invested in Legacy, and like I have some stuff I could show off. Like I have some foil decks too. Like maybe I could do like something like that. I'll definitely get in on your holiday foil bling tweet, whatever thread. So I'll play around with that. Michael Caffrey was giving me some feedback the other day. He owns Tales of Adventure. He does like MTG Finance YouTube stuff, and he encouraged me to do like a boiled down like 5 minutes of everything you need to know to start with this deck. Like if I put in 10 hours of testing and learn that like sequencing my lands is essential, or like some like little thing like that I like really have a grasp of after playing a league, but wouldn't really understand looking at the list, like just do 5 minutes on that. Like I'm going to save you 10 hours. Here's 5 minutes. That could be cool. But what really came up actually today on Twitter, there was a back and forth where like, in an article, I said Veil of Summer killed Ad Nauseam Tendrils, and then Bryant said, no, it didn't. It was Force of Negation and Mystic Sanctuary. And Bryant's so mad at me because that's not actually what he said. And then Alex McKinley chimed in and was like, actually, here's all the things that killed Ad Nauseam Tendrils while improving the Epic Storm. And I was like, how about we just make this into a video? So I have planned up. I'm going to be recording it about the time that this podcast drops. I'm going to have a Legacy Roundtable chat with Alex McKinley representing the Epic Storm and Daniel D'Amato representing Ad Nauseam Tendrils. And we're just going to have like a friendly debate over what happened to Ad Nauseam Tendrils, because it was crushing Legacy. It was the solution to the Rug Delver metagame. It won GP Atlanta, and then it disappeared off the planet Earth, and we haven't seen it since.
It pulled a Dexter?
Yes, it dextered. So we're going to talk about that in just like a free-form discussion. And if that's a hit, that's definitely something I can do more of. Just like get like, I don't know, like Julian and Hello Newton to hang out and talk about elves. And like, I don't know, like some 2 Death and Taxes masters. Like it just seems like it has like a bottomless potential there to showcase Legacy content creators and the format in a different kind of format.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I'm just letting you
that.
know, I'm going to watch the hell out of the one with Alex and Daniel. I can't wait to watch it. I don't watch your videos, Brian. I love you. You're a great guy. But that's what I would love to watch.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, how do I get different sort of people watching different sort of stuff? And it is just a totally different thing. And it's the type of thing you could pipe through your car speakers. Like, you don't even need to watch it. Like, it's basically just a video podcast. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Wrapping up this section, I think one of the things I'm most excited about is trying to make some short 5 to 10 minute videos that are more just like generically useful. After I made my first one on like heuristics of combat math and like when the bad attack is good, someone immediately shipped me $20 and was like, hey, can you put together one of those on mulligans? And so now I've spent the last week passively thinking about how I boil everything I think about in a mulligan decision down into just 10 minutes, which is...
Yeah, that's great.
It's going to be fun, but also like, God, there's so much there.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do with my Wizard School series, and I ran out of topics pretty quick, and they were just an outrageous amount of work for the amount of content you get out on the other end. But if I'm inspired, like I do have a similar sort of thing going on my channel. But I like that you're in it too. All right, what are we talking about today?
All right, we're going to talk about the Midrange War. This is something that is going on in most formats at most times, but I think it's so incredibly visible right now. So do one of you two want to start things off and just kind of explain what we're talking about, just sort of at the macro level?
I believe this is why I'm on the podcast. This is we have our prison god and our storm god, and here I am casting Brainstorm. So,
Whoa. I've been known to cast a Brainstormer too.
Your brainstorms are different.
I guess, yeah. My Brainstorm is to plan how to not lose for a few turns, and then, like, I'll win with the third or fourth Brainstorm. But, like, you're like, oh, if this Brainstorm finds 1 extra mana, I win.
Fine.
So, yeah, it's a little different. And I know that now because I did a video with Bryant that's going to be live by the time this podcast goes up. So if you want to see me and Bryant banter while he teaches me how to play the Epic Storm, that video is on BoshNRoll channel. But anyway, so mid-range decks. So in the archetype spectrum, we have like aggro, mid-range, control, and combo, which are usually about the macro archetypes that are safe to break Magic down to. And then, like, just above aggro, there's something called tempo, and tempo is about the most debated definition in Magic's history. So, like some
don't even do it. Don't even do it. Just skip over it.
I'm not going to touch it. It's an old legacy meme about what tempo actually means. And then above tempo, there's mid-range. So mid-range, they exist to be more powerful than aggro, but still low to the ground to beat up control before they get set up. That's your goal with a mid-range deck. Classic mid-range is like Jund. Like, pick your format. Like, standard, it's a modern deck. It was briefly a legacy deck. I've even seen it in vintage. That's a mid-range deck. Like, I got Tarmogoyf and Liliana the Veil. They're bigger than your little shitty aggro creatures. I got Lightning Bolt. And then I got Bloodbraid Elf to hammer in under the control deck. That's mid-range, quintessential mid-range. So how that applies to Legacy now is that historically, aggro and tempo mirrors are exploitable when someone goes just a little bit bigger. So going way back in time, history lesson, Alan Comer invented a deck called Miracle Grow. It was a deck that played only 10 lands, and it used cantrips to find those lands. That might sound similar if you play Legacy at all in the last 15 years, because he basically invented the Xerox mana base and the Xerox cantrip suite. And Blue-Green Miracle Grow was an incredible deck, dominated the format it was in. And then there was a Grand Prix where I believe it was Alex Schwartzman broke the Miracle Grow mirror by adding white for Swords to Plowshares and Mystic Enforcer. He just went a little bit bigger. He had a little bit better removal and could hit a little bit harder in the mid game, and he just crushed that GP. And then that deck eventually grew into GAT, or Grow-a-Tog, in Vintage, which it basically shucked the entire creature plan for just Psychotog. And it would just control the game, low land count, high cantrip count, high spell count, and then just whap you with a gigantic Psychotog when it was good and ready. So, like, that was the progression of that deck over time. It just got a little slower, got a little bigger, beat up the older version, but eventually you reach a point where, like, Grow-a-Tog probably wouldn't be great against the original Blue-Green Miracle Grow, but that was so far gone by that point that it didn't matter. We saw another thing when Treasure Cruise was legal in Legacy. Bob Wong won a Star City Open like the first weekend that Treasure Cruise was legal. It's just Blue-Red Delver. It set the format on fire. And GP New Jersey, the like gigantic, sweaty, awful GP New Jersey. Bryant, I'm sure you were there. Phil, were you there for that?
I was there too.
Oh, you both missed it? Wow. Oh, no, Phil was there.
No, I was there.
Bryant wasn't. Okay.
My sister decided to get married that day. Like, out of all of the weekends that she could have picked.
She did you a favor. My God, that GP was miserable. But anyway, there was one Legacy Grand Prix. It was in New Jersey. It was enormous. And Treasure Cruise was legal. And that Grand Prix was not won by Blue-Red Delver. It was won by Jeskai Stoneblade by Brian Braunduin. He still had 4 Treasure Cruise in his deck. He still had the Lightning Bolts, but he added white. Sounds familiar, right? For the Miracle Grow. He added white for Swords to Plowshares and Stoneforge Mystic. And he just had a beefier mid-range plan. It beat up on the quick aggro plan, but it still had the same velocity, just better payoffs and better interaction.
Guess what I lost to in my last 3 rounds of that event on day 2? It was that deck
Jeskai Stoneblade?
3 times in a row. I was ready for Blue-Red Delver. and I crushed it 2 days in a row. And then I got to that deck, and I was not ready.
Yep. When a format is narrow and defined by an aggressive deck, it's usually breakable by going just one click bigger. And that's what Brian Braun-Duin and the people around him did in that tournament. And that Jeskai Stoneblade deck was incredible. I played it in one tournament and I won that tournament. Like it was, and then they banned Treasure Cruise and it was gone. But that's like a history lesson in how this can look.
So being slightly bigger is really cool because there's almost never a real downside to doing it. Like at the cost of changing maybe 2 or 3 cards in your 75, you often get just a huge leg up. Sometimes the changes are more pronounced than that, but often they're really small. And your core engine, your core game plan is the same, but now you have some sort of haymaker, bomb, or tool that your opponents don't have that don't have sort of an equal to, and hence you get a huge leg up in the mirror and against other like pseudo mirrors and things that are doing similar plans.
Brian, do you happen to remember the blue-white Delver deck from Standard?
Yes.
I do as well.
Do you remember the format in Night that people started playing that with Battlecry, whenever it attacks, you get 2/1/1s?
Yeah,
Hero Blade Hold.
That's correct. So I remember by the end of that format, I played it in an invitational where the plan post board that everybody was on was to board into Sun Titans to get even bigger. And I just remember going like, I am not playing Sun Titan. Like, we were playing 18 lands, and I don't want to like board, like people are boarding up on lands to go even bigger than the Paladins. And I'm just like, why are we doing this? And I mean, I refused to, so I ended up not doing well in that event. But I was just like, enough is enough. Like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, so let's talk about that exact process. So while being a little bit bigger than your opponents or the other people who are playing your deck isn't that big of a deal, what happens when this process goes on for weeks or months and it becomes an arms race? That's really what we want to talk about today. This is Midrange Wars. And if this process repeats for months and you're trying to go bigger and bigger and bigger, then someone like, I don't know, a Tom Ross is going to come in with a deck full of mono red 1-drops and just murder you and punish you for trying to be bigger. Or someone like Bryant is going to come in with TES and just like collect his money and tournament winnings by killing you dead.
I hope.
Yep. Yeah, like we're going to get into some current examples, but like in the mid-range blue mirrors, like you almost always board out any number of Force of Negations you have. I tend to board out 1 to 3 Force of Wills also, depending on what haymakers we all have access to. But like if you start doing that in the main deck, like I'm only going to play 3 Force of Wills main deck because I'm ready I'm pre-boarded for mid-range. Now my pants are down to that Epic Storm player. Jim Rinkowitz won a Grand Prix with no Force of Wills in his main deck. I remember
that shit. That was wild.
Yeah, he played just fair and square, Bant mid-range. It was the format where Mental Misstep was legal. Stoneforge Mystic had just premiered. The joke of the format was called Standard still, because Stoneforge Mystic and Mental Misstep were both standard legal. And Team Channel Fireball shoved them into a standstill shell. But
it was Grand Prix Providence in 2012. I remember being in the room and people running around looking for Manriki Gusaris, and people were selling this uncommon for $55.
Fuck.
You got to do what you got to do. Yeah. I played Food Chain in that Grand Prix because I was religiously on Elves at the time, but Mental Misstep was legal, so I had to sidestep a little bit. But I did money that Grand Prix with Food Chain. But that's neither here nor there. Jim Rinkowitz won the Mental Misstep Stoneforge Mystic Grand Prix without Force of Will in his main deck, which is a bold metagame call, but like it's one that paid off for him that day. So like if that's the sort of thing people are doing, they're gonna get shithoused by the combo decks, and that's like metagame in flux. But right now, what we're seeing in Legacy is everyone just creeping up and up the curve. So let's get into some current examples.
And I think the easiest place to start with is Rogue Delver. And I'll start with an anecdote from my stream the other night. I had my Rug Delver player dead on board. There was no normally played card in their 75 that could get them out of the situation. I was just going to aggro in and kill them next turn. And then they cast an Uro. And I was like, oh no. The 3 life gave them another turn. And they used that turn to put the Uro in play, which gave them another 3 life and a giant blocker. And I promptly lost. Whereas a normal Rug Delver deck might not have been able to beat me, the Rug Delver deck that went just a little bit above the normal bigger of something like Oko obliterated me, and I was not ready for it.
Yep. I've seen those lists. I was it Daniel Gottschall who started doing that?
I believe so.
I believe so.
I've seen him post those lists. So just he didn't really cut much. Like there's what, like 1 or 2 Uros, and otherwise the 75 is indistinguishable from.
Yep.
Or the other 73 cards are just Rug Delver shit, and like that just gives you that crazy hammer, and it costs very little.
I think it might be important to discuss why Rug Delver is going larger as well. Like, Rug Delver was king of the world, right? Like, nothing could stop it. People, BoshNRoll went 10-0 and back-to-back challenges with the deck. And then Death and Taxes came back.
Apparition there,
yeah.
Just doing so much work. The Rug Delver pilots were posting embarrassing statistics. It was some, like, pro or grinder or something posted, like, I think I'm 20% against Death and Taxes right now.
Christopher Pakula.
Thank you. And that was sort of the experience of a lot of people, and so it was time to try something new. I don't know whether or not this has improved things, and it's kind of weird, because, like, Uro is Karakasable, but, like, damn if that card getting into play and sticking isn't horrendous for D&T if, like, it actually happens and works.
Yeah, and I think it's important because they were forced to adapt, and now because they're going a little bit bigger, they're also a little bit better against Snow. So it's like a double-edged sword helping them, but they get a little bit worse against Combo and other decks that are trying to go even larger than Snow.
Yep. So in addition to Uro, we see Klothys in Rug Delver lists. That's another card that just, it does a different thing than the normal Rug plan. It's a little bigger. It costs more mana. It doesn't hit your opponent's face, and it doesn't counter one of their spells, and it doesn't draw cards, which are the 3 things that the cards in Rug Delver are supposed to do. But Klothys just pivots onto this different axis, and it can totally pick apart other mid-range mirrors. Like, if you have Klothys in your hand against the Epic Storm, LOL, nice fucking card. If you even get that into play before you're dead, it's never going to trigger. And if it does, it's not going to matter. But, like, I being the Monarch player here, the blue Monarch player lately, when I see a Klothys, I'm like, oh no.
It's so sticky. It's so sticky.
So you may not remember this, but I did win a challenge with Rug Delver. I played 2 of them in the sideboard. Every single time I opened one in my hand, and I would go, all right, my opponent has 8 turns to kill me, because this card will kill them within 8 turns. And that's just what that card does. It gives you the inevitability in any matchup where you have it.
And inevitability is often something that you're trying to get by going slightly bigger. The Death and Taxes decks slotting in Yorion is a great example of that, where you get something that can potentially give you, like, a Flicker Wisp blink and another piece of equipment off a Stoneforge late in the game after, like, say you flood it out and run out of resources. You're just looking for that little bit more extra push in order to get the win. Or, like, we saw the Snow decks a few weeks ago playing Felidar Retreat to just go and have inevitability and turn your land drops into creatures. You're just looking for something to give you just that little bit more over your opponent.
Phil, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have the Yorion Death and Taxes decks adapted Charming Prince like the standard decks? Because the standard interaction between Yorion and Charming Prince is just stupid. And they have Apparition there as well. So I was curious if the Legacy decks were doing anything similar to that.
So you see it sometimes. the need is a little bit less since you already have Flicker Wisp in the first place, so it doesn't necessarily have to be Charming Prince. And it sounds weird to say this, but even in the 80 card D&T list, things are still kind of tight because you're trying to replicate certain effects, so that you still have a decent curve. So you might play 2 Spirit of the Labyrinth normally. Well, now you want to play 4 or something like that. So even though you're opening up 20 slots, after you add in the additional lands that you need, there's not actually all that many slots there. So I often see Charming Princes like maybe a one of, but it has not become a central part of the plan or anything, I don't think.
Okay.
The card Yorion is almost printed with mid-range arms races in mind. Just like think about what Yorion does to a deck where it is the companion. Like what it in the appeal of playing the normal 60 cards or 40 unlimited is that you draw your best cards more often. Like that's why you want to stick to the normal deck size. That's simple probability. Like that's not rocket science. So why would, like, in what circumstances would you dilute the best cards in your deck in order to get this 8 mana payoff that requires you to be on board to really pay off anything at all? Like, what kind of games does that lend itself to? And it's mid-range wars. Like, when Yorion was first printed, back before the Companion rule change even, like, obviously I was testing all sorts of Yorion decks. And what I came down to was, if my opponent is a combo deck, I really wish I wasn't a Yorion deck. But in every other circumstance, I'm so glad I was. And that it just like really starkly forces you to understand mid-range arm races, because Yorion that's what it's for.
I think we also see a little bit of that with Felidar Retreat, right? Like it's saying, hey, I'm going to play the mid-range mirror at some point. Like someone's going to be equally as large, and Snow for a long time was the top of the mid-range. Like Snow is essentially a mid-range deck. Like we call it Control, but it's pretty much a mid-range deck. Like I think Miracles is actually the next deck up, but Felidar Retreat is helping you at that similar level.
Yeah, and that was a metagame in Shift. There was a mid-range war going on. It was like Uro and Oko were the core of the Snow deck, and then it was people started main decking Red Blast to deal with the Uros and the Okos, and then we had Abrupt Decay to deal with Uros and Okos, and then people were like playing Clothis to deal with the Uros and like fight on that axis. And then here's this 4 mana. I mean, it's a 4 mana do nothing. Like you need to have a land drop left to make and a land to play. It's this 4 mana do nothing, but it's not blue. It costs 4. It's not getting Flusterstormed. It's not getting Red Blast. It's not getting Abrupt Decayed.
Elked.
And it's not going to get elked. Exactly. Like that. It was the next click up. But again, like that Clothis in the Rug Delver, like that card's in your hand versus combo. Nice job. You mulled to 6.
So do you want to start on carpet?
I was going to talk about what control decks are up to. We were about to skip one there.
Okay. Sorry. I thought we kind of hit on some of that stuff just now.
Yeah, so I talked about main deck Pyroblast a little bit, but control decks, like actual control, like basic island, basic planes, no Astrolabe control, which I've been working on a bit, especially with the new Monarch cards. Monarch cards are a commitment to a mid-range war. Like a lot of those don't have a great impact on the board when they're played, but they set you up to gain advantage over time. And if you don't expect the game to go long, that's not something worth investing in. Like you don't see the Epic Storm playing Chord of Cunning. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't make any sense. I put Moat. I tested Moat in Shark still and in Blue-White Monarch. Jarvis changed my Moat to a Humility in my Bant Court shell, and he said that was pretty good. And most recently, I've even been testing main deck Rest in Peace. Like I cut the Moats and put Rest in Peace Energy Field into the main deck because Rest in Peace cuts off so many of those. Like it cuts off Klothys, cuts off Uro. Like I'm just getting ahead in the mid-range war, and those are all decisions made in that space. But Moat, Humility, main deck Rest in Peace, embarrassing against the Epic Storm. Here we are again. Epic Storm is the bad guy this episode, or at least the police, the cops. So all of those cards pretty bad there, but they help in those specific arms race situations.
If this is going to be called mid-range wars, can we be the dark side at least? Like, why do we have to be cops?
Yeah, all right, dark side it is. Let's roll with this for the rest of the episode. All right. So another important thing to realize about the mid-range war is that it's not always about having a card with a higher converted mana cost. Like, you don't need to go the next step up and be playing like a Thragtusk or a Titan or something. Sometimes
that sounds sweet, Phil. You not want a free 3/3? 5 life?
Did you bring 2 spears?
I have Restoration Angeled some Thragtusks in Legacy. I will fully admit that shit right
Phil,
there.
I'm going to make a judgment based on you. I'm willing to bet that you've tried Nick Fit in your life.
I mean, it wasn't just one time either.
It was in college. I was trying all sorts of different things.
Look, man, the Rhino, it's just kind of sexy, and like sometimes you just got to go back to it. You just need to like get that shit out of your system, and you feel better afterwards.
Yep. Now you know if you like it or not, but you had to try it first.
Yeah. My Nick Fit judgments essentially boil down to the fact that, like, damn, that deck makes for good content because you get to do hilarious bullshit that, like, should not be allowed.
Yeah, I posted a nice screenshot to Twitter last week. I was actually playing Hollowvine against Nick Fit, but their Veteran Explorers put all of my lands into play from my deck on turn 3. So I had this great screenshot of me doing outrageous things because I had access to, like, 7 mana plus my Lion's Eye Diamonds. I think I brought back like 2 different Ox of Agonis's in the same turn and cast a hollow one, and then also like triggered 2 Vengevines. This was all on turn 3. So Nick Fit, yeah, it makes for good screenshots.
All right. So one of my absolute favorite things in the world is beating someone with their own strategy. So I love playing against Nick Fit or like a Eureka deck where they just like do their thing, execute it, and you're like, hold on a second. You gave me an unhealthy amount of mana. Let me show you something cool.
Yep. In our league we recorded, Phil and I recorded Death and Taxes. We played against Aloran in one league, and Death and Taxes is full of 3-drop and smaller creatures. That was fun. One more story, then I'll let you talk about Carpet of Flowers. Steve Rubin one time was playing some like Esper Stoneblade or something against Nick Fit at a Legacy tournament in Pittsburgh. And the opponent did like the turn 1 Cabal Therapy, named something in the blind. It missed, it hit, I don't remember. But it saw that Jace the Mind Sculptor was in Rubin's hand. And Rubin was like, land go. And then the opponent's like, Veteran Explorer, flashback, name Jace. And Rubin's like, hold your horses. Gets 2 islands out of his deck, counterspells the Cabal Therapy, then untapped and cast Jace. And easily won the game.
Yeah.
You love to see it.
All right. So Carpet of Flowers is a different way to attack the mid-range arms race. So something that's weird that can happen when the decks get too mid-rangey is you have too many cards and not enough mana to actually cast them. If your hand is like Oko, Klothys, Questing Beast, or some shit like that, like you have trouble casting all of those cards while also interacting with your opponent, right? And so if you play something like a Carpet of Flowers, and then all of a sudden you get a Black Lotus worth of mana every turn in these blue mirrors, then all of a sudden you get to deploy all of your cool cards and your opponent doesn't, and you pull so far ahead because you actually get to utilize your cards while interacting with your opponent. And Carpet of Flowers has become this brutal mirror breaker or like sideboarding option. I've even seen Carpet of Flowers in the main deck of some of these blue decks now, just like in an attempt to pre-board for them.
Yeah, I played Pokemoki's Bant Hullbreacher deck on my channel last week, and it had a main deck carpet in it, and then a couple more in the sideboard, plus Noble Hierarch in the main. So like, Phil said that the Midrange War is not about casting the highest converted mana cost thing, but it is about spending the most mana. Like, I would bet that if we go turn by turn, break down a mid-range mirror, the player who spent more mana is going to win it more often of the time. Like, short of like a mana screw, mana flood situation where someone just runs away with Oko or whatever, if we really play a game, the player who spends more mana is going to win it.
So Carpet of Flowers is one of the reasons why the Epic Storm has sort of taken Ant's spot as well. I know that we were joking about it today on Twitter, Brian, but traditionally, at least in the past, the Epic Storm was the fast deck and Ant was the mid-range and slow deck. The Epic Storm gets to do it all now thanks to Carpet of Flowers. You really get to punish these blue decks by playing Defense Grid plus Claw in one turn, or Burning Wish plus Defense Grid, or Burning Wish Claw, like all these things. Like, you get to utilize your mana so much better, and you actually have a much better late game now than other combo decks, while being fast against decks like Death and Taxes.
Yeah, for the listeners, if you're interested in Carpet of Flowers specifically as a topic in blue decks, Pokimoki wrote a like baby article, like a little 3-page article, just as a Google Doc about like Carpet of Flowers and what it's doing right now. He posted that to Twitter on the 14th. So feel free to go check that out. It's a short read, but if you're just kind of curious about why that card is picking up so much right now, it goes into more depth than what we can go into here.
It's slightly off topic, but I think it's on topic, so I'm going to mention it. Today in the Storm Discord, we were talking about Vintage and how discard spells don't see play there for a number of reasons, but I think the primary reason is that the top of your opponent's deck now is so strong. And I almost feel like we're almost to that point in Legacy. I think we're not quite there yet, but discard spells are becoming worse and worse just because every card in your opponent's hand nowadays is just bonkers. Like, in the past, you used to look at their hand, they'd have 1 or 2 good cards, you'd pick an avenue, and then you'd play around that avenue. You'd be like, okay, I'm not going to let them do this the rest of the game. Now when you cast a Thoughtseize, you're just looking at 5 studs and 2 lands. And it's making those sort of effects not as good as they were even a couple of years ago. So I think the mid-range war has a big part to do with this, where we keep on going bigger and bigger, and the cards are all just amazing now, instead of having cards that were a little bit smaller and more efficient than we did in the past, like Spell Snare and Nimble Mongoose that we saw during the Loras era.
All right, we're tangenting now because this is like legit interesting.
Yeah, I want to jump on this tangent and talk about a concept that Patrick Sullivan developed called Bane Drifters, where back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean like 4 years ago, creatures were either Baneslayer Angels or they were Maul Drifters. Like, you're going to get some value out of it, or it's going to be a big, thick booty to win the game with. And Uro is a Bane Drifter. It's just both. Oko is a Bane Drifter. It's both. I'm sure we could think of other things like Klothys, even kind of a Bane Drifter. That's just how they're designing cards to sell sets now. And I don't want to get into the whole we actively avoid being legacy boomers and complaining about modern card design on this cast. But that is just how cards are being designed now. Like, Bane Drifters are what sells sets. Like, Terror of the Peaks was a card that came out this year. You may not remember it because it didn't do anything. That card would have shredded standard Magic and maybe even been like Pioneer playable 5 years ago, if Pioneer was a thing 5 years ago. Let me just pull up this card and read it real quick.
Oh, I know what it does off the top of my head. But think about how playable Stormbreath Dragon was. This card's better than Stormbreath.
Yeah, so Terror of the Peaks, 3 red, so 5 total, 5/4 flying dragon. Spells your opponents cast the target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target.
Damn.
So, yeah, so this is just a fat above rate flyer with 2 different upsides. It's resistant to removal. If they're going to remove it, it's going to hurt them. If it stays in play, it's going to hurt them even more. And like, that card was unplayable. Didn't get touched in standard. Because it's just a Baneslayer. It's not a Bane Drifter.
So I think we're also seeing some Bane Drifters with things like Bonecrusher Giant. Like, you get value out of it twice, even though it's not as large. And sometimes you see that with other cards. Like, it doesn't always have to be huge. Like Phil was saying, like, they don't have to be expensive as long as you're getting that extra value.
Yeah. I mean, I had not thought of Brazen Borrower as a Bane Drifter, but it is. Like, they don't. It's not necessarily card advantage. It's more tempo advantage. Here we go again. Tempo. What is tempo? But like, yeah, your removal spell also being a real threat. Like, I've lost games to a Brazen Borrower that like bounced something, like bounced an elk, then came in the end step and cracked me 3 times, and I died before I could recover. Like that happens. And
commonly
Bone Crusher Giant
as well.
Yeah, it's not even an uncommon thing.
All right, Phil, I suppose we'll let you talk more about Carpet if that's what you wanted to do, or we can go to the next thing.
Yeah, I feel like we should just move on. Like we've still got a lot of meat to this episode.
We're only an hour and a half in. I mean, we got plenty of time.
Yeah.
I hope you're all hungry.
All right. Why don't we transition to talking about going under now? So there are going to be a lot of people who are like trying to win this mid-range race, right? And when everyone is competing with the mid-range race, one of the ways you can win is just like refuse to play that game and gear your deck in the opposite directions. So in standard decks of times past, we often saw these sly decks, these like hyper aggressive red aggro decks with burn as finishers that just went under what everyone else was doing when they were fighting some arms races. In Legacy, we saw people do this with Infect very frequently. It's like, oh, you're trying to play this big long game, are you? Haha, Invigorate Berserk goes brrrr.
Yep, let me tell you about trying to beat an Inkmoth Nexus with Miracles. Blech. It was a bad time.
So our listeners might remember an episode, I want to say it was probably like 8 episodes ago, where we talked about the health of Legacy with Rug Delver. And in it, I talked about how Rug Delver had gone up to 7 forces and how it was becoming impossible to beat them due to the card advantage and all this good stuff. And that's changed quite a bit. And I think, honestly, I have to thank Skyclave Apparition. And because Skyclave forced these Rug Delver decks to quit being so linear and broaden themselves a little bit. So instead of seeing 7 forces now, we're seeing 5. On average, more closer to 6, but some lists have 5. We're seeing more bolts now. We're seeing more chain lightnings. And that's this Rug Delver deck becoming more of a mid-range deck, but they do sacrifice. And one of the ways that you can beat them is by going under, like Phil said. So if these Delver decks are having more bolts, they're going to die more to Oopsell spells. They're going to die more to the Epic Storm. Dredge, for example, like not having that extra force of negation to hit the Faithless Looting, that sort of thing. I mean, the Epic Storm crushes Snow for that very reason. Like, they're too busy casting Icefang Coatls.
Yeah, and there's so many different decks that you can choose to go under. We just kind of like put together a list. So the Epic Storm, Show and Tell, Hogak, Oops, Burn, Dredge, Reanimator, Turbo Depths, and there's plenty more that you could add to this list, like say Doomsday or something like that. If your opponents are taking their sweet time and getting going and playing cards that aren't really relevant to your strategy, you can punish them if you can just win the game quickly.
Yep, when that Show and Tell resolves and you put in Felidar Retreat, you're going to feel like a dummy.
All right, so we kind of meant this section as a baby section because I think this concept is kind of self-explanatory. Do either of you have anything you want to add?
Only a small bullet. Going under is a lot more difficult than it was in the past. So I was pretty early to adapt going under against Miracles. Like, at the time, all the TS lists had 2 Chromoxin, and I realized I was winning more I quit being a bad Past in Flames deck, and I started just embracing TS's strengths, and I went up to 3 Chromoxin, and eventually I got up to 4 before, top left the format, and then I could go back to being reasonable. But I realized that I needed to play into my strength. It's a lot more difficult to do that now due to Force of Negation, and I'm not trying to complain about Force of Negation. It's just a harsh truth of current Legacy. Your opponents are more likely to have that turn 1 piece of interaction. So while it's nice to be blazing fast, you do have to be a little bit resilient. I just wanted to add in that little bit of a bullet.
Yeah, on that point, in our league that we played, Brian, we played a Epic Storm Mirror against Jacob, who is a longtime Epic Storm pilot. And I've seen that dude slam more into a turn 1 force than anyone, because it used to just be like 60% of the time I win that game. Like, I've heard him say that so often, where it's like he would rather just, take the 40% chance that he loses on the spot than try to sculpt and then open up like the cantrips, the spell pierces, the flusterstorms, etc. And that heuristic, I don't know if it was ever true, but it's definitely not true anymore.
It used to be. Not so much anymore.
Yeah. On a different axis, a lot of the like prison style decks are having more trouble now than they used to because of this like 6 to 7 force problem. Like that chalice or whatever you're trying to jam on turn 1 doesn't resolve as frequently. And now there are also just more powerful things that your opponents are playing on average. So it's a little scarier to be playing the prison deck when you can be facing down like Oko and Uro and all sorts of BS of that nature.
Yeah, prison decks are like the stompy style, like Ancient Tomb prison decks. Those are made to feast on like the aggro and tempo decks. And now that everyone's a mid-range deck, it's just a lot worse. Like I've been playing the bigger deck for a while now, like Miracles or Stoneblade, whatever it is, like bigger than Delver. And a lot of the times, like, I'm holding force and I just let Chalice resolve. Or I'm like, yeah, I can beat a Thorn of Amethyst. Like, I can play through that Trinisphere. I'll save this for their Chandra or whatever is actually going to kill me. And, like, that's not something that a Delver deck can let happen. But it's definitely something that a mid-range deck can let happen.
Yeah, I don't know that I would play Prison in a serious tournament right now, unless I was one of the like blue versions with Hull Breacher that is just like doing something legitimately unfair to balance the like broken stuff your opponents are doing.
Right. Being a combo deck that also has Chalice in it is a pretty solid place to be, as opposed to just a classic Prison deck.
You stole my words, Brian. I would not consider Echo, Narset, Karn trash to be a prison deck. That is a combo deck masquerading as a prison deck.
It's a hybrid deck, which is just really awesome. Like, I just love that space exists in Legacy. The deck is basically tailor-made to defeat the Epic Storm because it has Chalice of the Void and fast mana and Force of Will and Karn the Great Creator. So it's a tough time. I understand why Bryant wouldn't like it, but that doesn't come without cost either.
Yeah.
Like, when you're doing like that, that's also kind of a mid-range war. Like, I'm this like mid-range stompy deck with a combo kill. Like, that's what I'm bringing to the mid-range war. But like, if you play against an actual tempo deck where they're just like Force of Will, your Chalice, Wasteland, the Ancient Tomb you cast it with, nice hand, idiot. Like, that sometimes the game ends on the spot. So like that's all metagame stuff. But
Ancient Tomb also does not feel free anymore. Like,
oh, no.
I have felt the damage from my own Ancient Tomb so much these last few months. People are hitting hard. Like,
that's because every blue deck has haste creatures in it now.
Yeah.
With Oko.
Brian brought up a pretty good point there. Doomsday is essentially a mid-range deck to me. Whenever I play the Doomsday matchup, I'm like, they can be just as fast as me, but they get to play Forcible, and I have to respect it, where they don't have to respect that out of me. And that makes the Doomsday matchup pretty difficult. So it's just like that next level up. They are the mid-range to my tempo.
Yeah, leading up to Eternal Weekend 2019, Cyrus Cormangill and I, we were both in the Vintage Super League. We had both top-8'd Eternal Weekend the year before. That was when we met. We were in touch, talking about Magic throughout the year. We did some testing together, bouncing theory off each other leading up to Eternal Weekend the 2019. And he ended up being on Dark Petition Storm, and I ended up on Paradoxical Outcome. And Dark Petition Storm, although it is a Dark Ritual Storm deck, it has a slower Goldfish and doesn't have Force of Will when it's head-to-head against Paradoxical Outcome. And, like, Paradoxical Outcome can't really beat Xerox because they have so many red blasts, but Dark Petition Storm doesn't play any blue cards, and they have Defense Grid in the main. So, like, it was just sort of a rock, paper, scissors thing. And Cyrus and I actually ended up getting paired in round 1 of Eternal Weekend with me on PO and him on Dark Perdition Storm. And like, he kept 7, and I just easily browned him on a Multifor. And it was like, I felt bad because like we had worked so hard together to determine how unwinnable that was for him. But like, it's the same thing. Like, I have the option to go mid-range with my combo deck, and you just don't.
So a lot of what we're talking about right now is sort of on a gradient, right? On a scale. And you're often looking to be just this one tick bigger than someone else. But what if we blow this like way out of proportion, go like this is Spinal Tap, crank it up to 11. Where do we end up if we just go stupid big?
What if we just hardcast some Eldrazi?
Let's crank it up to 12, right? That's where this is going?
I see, because 12 is bigger than 11. Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's also the number of posts in the 12-post deck, boys.
Oh.
Welcome to the joke. So...
You might breaking it down. I don't understand, Brian.
Okay,
UI
so there's
5.
a deck called 12 Post. Like your 5. There's a deck called 12 Post because it plays 12 Cloud Posts.
But you're only allowed to play 4.
Not this deck. They fucking
Vesuvas.
cheat hard.
Yeah, they have Vesuvas, they have Thespian Stages, they have Glimmer Posts. You can post right up, like Shaquille O'Neal. And so this deck basically doesn't do anything for the first few turns of the game. If you're not familiar, all jokes aside, Cloud Post is a land that comes into play tapped and taps for 1 colorless for each locus you control. And Cloud Post is a land-locus. And Glimmer Post was printed close to a decade after Cloud Post was.
Scars of Mirrodin?
Yeah, and Scars of Mirrodin. And Glimmer Post is a land-locus. When it enters the battlefield, gain 1 life, taps for a colorless. So it basically only exists to fuel Cloud Post. And if you get... So the first Cloud Post taps for 1. The second Cloud Post, they both tap for 4. The third one, they tap for 9 together. So it's like exponential growth. And then you have Vesuva to copy your Cloud Post. You have Glimmer Post to bump. Like, if you have 3 Cloud Posts in play, Glimmer Post taps for 4, effectively. Like, the mana scales in an absurd direction. And this deck doesn't really do anything in the early turns of the game, except make land drops. And a lot of them come into play tapped. And this deck gets chewed right up by Wasteland backed by a clock. But if you don't have Wasteland, or if you're not clocking, you're going to be facing down hardcast Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, very soon. The deck plays Golos to tutor up Eye of Ugin. Eye of Ugin can tutor up Emrakul, and then she's on the stack. And the deck also plays Karakas, so it can bounce Emrakul and cast it again. The deck can take infinite turns, and all of them involve attacking with Emrakul. And like that happens pretty quickly. And there is no counterspell that's going to get through that. And the inevitability is crushing.
Brian, technically there is a single counterspell. You might remember this. The purpose of Mindbreak Trap being printed was to exile Emrakul from the stack. I don't know if it's ever happened, but it's been cast plenty of times against me. And just for once, I would like that, spaghetti monster to get exiled. Like, give it its function.
Let me look up. I think there's one other one that might do it. Yeah, Summary Dismissal also does it. Summary Dismissal is Mindbreak Trap without trap, without being a trap.
Wasn't that one printed for the Promised End?
Yes, that was in Eldritch Moon. Summary Dismissal is blue, and 2, exile all other spells and counter all abilities. So that one also clears the stack. So there's a few ways to interact with Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. But boarding and Mindbreak Trap against 12 Post is not where you want to be. Though it might be where you have to be, honestly.
Yeah. I remember a lot of days of like blue-white miracles being one of like the best decks of the format, and people were trying to play 12 Post in order to just sort of like crush on them and meme on them. And there were a lot of desperation plays where like that's the sort of stuff you do. Or like you're only out towards really beating them is like Venser plus Karakas or something crazy like that. These decks often just clown on the control decks. Now, not always, but very, very frequently. Even the things that are smaller than Emrakul are still a beating. Like Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, even if it just exiles 2 of your lands, like, that's usually pretty brutal.
Yeah, I've lost a number of games to 12 post. Like, you need specific hate, like Back to Basics or Blood Moon, if you're a control deck trying to beat these 12 post decks. But even that isn't necessarily enough. Like, I've had Blood Moon in play, like turn 3 Blood Moon on the play against 12 post. And if you can't clock, which a lot of control decks can't do, because that's not how they're designed, your opponent will just get up to like 10 mana. Like, maybe Grim Monolith is involved or some other ramp spell, but like, they can just get up to 10, cast Ulamog, eat your Blood Moon and your Planeswalker, and then you're losing. Like, they didn't do anything for a long time, and their one spell just wrecks you, and you can't counter it because it's a triggered ability. Like, even if you counter Ulamog, you're still losing your Blood Moon and your Oko. And, like, all of that, it all comes crashing down. Like, these decks, you need to pinch their mana early, and then you need to close. And that's a tough thing for mid-range decks to do. It's hard for them to do either of those things, much less both.
In full disclosure here, there are certain games where you counter 2 critical spells, and the 12-post deck flops around and doesn't do anything. Like, those games definitely exist. Those are the games that you can win as the control deck. But inevitability is certainly there. Sometimes at lower mana costs than we're used to. A lot of these newer versions are playing Primeval Titan, and that when that comes down on turn 4 or something, that is a big uh-oh.
Question, can you go larger than the 12-post deck? Like, can you out mid-range the top of the curve?
Ramp is not really mid-range. Like, that's a... Ramp kind of exists on the spectrum in a place like Tempo does, where it's not in, like, the core, like, aggro control combo. Like, it's off to the side somewhere. And I don't know who could hang with 12-post. Just, if we're in a haymaker match where we're both goldfishing, we're both doing our best thing, like, short of a combo kill, I don't know who can hang with that top end. Is there an answer? Were you queuing it up, or was that a real question?
That was me giving you a softball.
Oh, did I blow it?
I don't know. I feel like it was a foul tip.
I don't know. Like, how about you guys explain to me what beats Emrakul the Aeon's Torn every turn?
So, like you mentioned, the ramp decks exist outside of midrange. I think that they live parallel to control decks. Sometimes the control decks have enough tools to beat these ramp decks, because they're also fighting on a slightly different axis. So you mentioned like Blood Moon and stuff. Well, every once in a while you get a control deck running from the Ashes going, well, you just can't have lands. That happens as well. So there are ways. I just think that they tend to live in the same space, just different.
Okay. All right. I see where you were going now.
All right. That was not the question you asked, but it is a real thing. Yeah. So if in the mid-range war, like this is parlaying pretty smoothly into our next section, which is how metagames fluctuate, basically. And what Bryant just described is like in one of my recent leagues, I got absolutely dumpstered by 12 posts. I was playing one of my blue-white Monarch decks, and like I had Back to Basics in one of the games, and I didn't have it in the other 2 games, and that was everything. And I was only playing one because I wasn't, boarding for Cloudpost, building for Cloudpost, but you probably should these days, like having 2 or 3 Back to Basics, or like Bryant said, something like From the Ashes that just destroy all lands, and they don't have enough basics to search up more. Like, those sort of things you can play, but I would call those like sideboard choices, metagame choices, rather than like hanging in the deep end with Emrakul, because nothing hangs in the deep end with Emrakul. Like, I don't care how big my shark is. It's not going to beat.
I was literally
Emrakul.
just going to make a joke about sharks being in the deep end. Same wavelength.
Yeah, I guess if I ever get 18 lands into play, I can make a 16/16 shark and just beat Emrakul in combat. But the fucked up thing, when Emrakul dies, she shuffles into your deck, and you still have Ayavugan, and you just get her and cast her again, and they will take another turn, and eventually, even with your 18 lands, they're going to annihilate her, that shark out of the way, and you're going to die. Like it's this, it's like that end game is like it is literally infinite turns where they eat 6 permanents a turn.
I have a challenge. And Marcus Awald, you're probably listening to this. I would like you to cast High Tide into Time Spiral, make a huge shark, and then like Cunning Wish or some sort of time lock, and then attack through an Emrakul. I would like this to happen. I would like a Moto screenshot presented by next week. Please make this happen.
We're gonna need like Jeremy in on the game, so we just queue into him. So there's always gonna be an Emrakul in the match, and just like. And he has to agree not to counter any of my spells. Like, I will never counter Show and Tell if he promises to only put in Emrakul, and then I'll put in Basic Island, and that'll ramp me to the High Tide I'm looking for. And like, yeah, that sounds reasonable.
This seems like good honest magic.
Yeah.
Anyway, there are other people trying to like do this go big plan in a slightly different way. We've been seeing an odd number of Legacy Primeval Titan and Elvish Reclaimer decks popping up recently that are looking to go bigger than a lot of these mid-range decks with things like Field of the Dead, or are looking to convert resources very efficiently by, say, activating a Reclaimer, getting rid of a Flagstones, and then it ramps you in addition to tutoring. So these decks often go bigger than some of the other mid-rangey decks of the format, and sometimes are also presenting like combo kills with Valakut as well.
That deck reminds me a lot of 4-Color Loam. I know that they're not the same deck. I'm not trying to say that they are, but it took the strengths of 4-Color Loam while getting rid of what made 4-Color Loam not as good in the current metagame. You're getting rid of Mox Diamond because it's an elk. You're getting rid of Chalice of the Void because it's an elk. And you're just focusing on what 4-Color Loam did best.
Yeah, this is a modern port. Like Primeval Titan has been a pillar of modern basically since its inception. And right now with Field of the Dead and Dryad of the Elysian Grove, Primeval Titan is, even if it's answered right away, even if they have the path to exile instantly, it's going to leave like 3 zombies and a Valakut behind. And if Dryad was in play, you're taking 9 or 12 on the way out. Like these decks are really cool. Like these super linear Cavern of Souls fueled. They're like the spiritual successor to Amulet Titan, because like it turns out that you don't need to do that anymore. You can just play Dryad of the Elysian Grove, hit an extra land drop for 2 turns in a row, and cast Primeval Titan on turn 4 for a lethal Valakut. And it's bananas. And the Legacy card pool contains all that stuff too, plus more.
This is one of those decks that I want to try out the current iteration. I tested some of the earlier versions before they were more refined, and they felt good then. So I'm sure after like more of the community and Hive Mind has had a chance to get at it, that these probably feel pretty smooth.
Yeah, I recorded a league with a Primeval Titan Stompy deck, like probably right when Theros Reborn, Theros Reborn. What is that set called?
Nobody knows.
Beyond Death? Is that?
Oh, that one sounds
Theros
right.
Beyond Death, yes.
Yeah, Theros Beyond Death. Right when that came out and Dryad of the Elysian Grove was printed, I tried a really early that version of that deck. I didn't play it very well because it was way out of my wheelhouse. I made some sequencing errors and stuff, and it still felt good in my clumsy hands with that ugly list. And it's only gotten better.
I don't like that Theros Beyond Death is not TBD. They're like, whoa, we need to keep on using that abbreviation. We'll make it THB or THD. I'm just saying Wizards effed up.
I see.
Okay.
What else is new? Oh, okay. All right. Moving on to our final section. All right. It was low-hanging fruit. I had to take that one. It was just so easy.
Yeah. Got him.
All right.
These nuts. So, the final section, we've been hinting at it in various forms the whole way. This is just the undulations of a healthy metagame. So, the mid-range war is raging. 12 Post comes in to just smush everyone. Then Combo and the Wasteland Tempo decks push 12 Post out of the spotlight. The lean Tempo decks push Combo aside. The lean Tempo decks will prey on each other. Someone will get the idea to go a little bigger with an Uro, and around we go. And that I think that's healthy. Like, that's not a problem. None of this is a problem. I don't mind Legacy being bogged down in Midrange war because it's so exploitable if you just want to take the effort.
I agree with you that Legacy feels really cylindrical right now. And I don't want to turn this into a bigger metagame discussion because our next episode, we're going to be wrapping up 2020 and talk about some of this stuff. But I will agree with you that I do like how the format's been rotating.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are really down on how mid-rangey it is right now. There's kind of a blur. I forget who was talking about this, but someone was talking about like, hey, Legacy feels healthy, and then there's this asterisk, like, as long as you consider the like different Oko Uro decks as being different, or as long as you consider these different Astrolabe decks as being different. Because there is a certain portion of the metagame, like a good chunk of it right now, that is just kind of blue mush as these decks try to out mid-range each other. And right now, with the like overall quality of the 2019-2020 printings, sometimes it just feels like you're seeing the same stuff just so frequently.
I love the bias that is sometimes incorporated into that, like the Astrolabe decks. We're not calling them Ponder decks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Ponder's been around forever. All these decks play Ponder. Like, they're not, like, sometimes people say Brainstorm decks, but, like, Brian and I both play Brainstorm decks. They're not exactly the same. Like, I think that if these cards were printed, like, if Astrolabe, let's say, was printed in 2012, I don't think we'd be talking about it.
Do you want to use your true name example? That was you, right?
It was Patrick Sullivan, but he's very smart, and I say this all the time. When True Name Nemesis was printed in 2013 and everyone had their pitchforks out saying that Wizards ruined Legacy, how could they consider such a busted card in the format? Patrick Sullivan said, what if that was in Tempest and Wasteland was in a Commander product this year? Like, think about what we're used to and if it's actually like good or reasonable or if we're just used to it. Like the Pauper format has a similar thing going on. Like, I don't want to tangent too hard right as we're wrapping up here, but I'm fucking gonna because that's what we do. Pauper is pretty unhealthy right now. There was a new 3-mana removal spell in blue printed in Commander Legends that has the Monarch attached to it. It's like a Fall from Favor. It's like a sleep with the Monarch attached, and that card is ruining Pauper because I've seen screenshots of like the same Ninja of the Deep Hours with 4 of that card on it because it's just so desperate to get the Monarch. You just like re-enchant one because it's the only creature. Like, that looks bad.
Does that card allow it to untap after? I thought it permanently tapped it. Is it just one turn?
Yeah. No, it's forever. Okay. But like, if like I Monarch your Ninja of the Deep Hours and I'm the Monarch and you have Fall from Favor, but that's the only creature in play. You have to aura your own guy, and then I hit it again to take the Monarch back. And like, it's just so stupid. But like, people complain in Pauper about like Fall from Favor. They complained about Arkham's Astrolabe. They complained about all sorts of stuff. But they've been playing with Tron lands since the format was born. Like, somehow that's like, oh no, Tron is a pillar. We have to leave it alone. But the most busted deck is always a fucking Tron deck. Like, we talk about mid-range wars, like, whatever shell is the best in Pauper, someone will put it into a Tron shell and make it better. Blue-Red Monarch was, or Red-White Monarch was the best deck for a while back when the Pauper Premier League was running. So I played White-Red Tronarch in the league, and I fucking crushed it. I just like farmed my week when I played White-Red Tronarch because it was just the same deck, but I could have 7 mana on turn 3. So like, getting used to stuff that is bullshit versus like overreacting to something that might be fine. Like, just like the opposition agent freak out, even the Hull Breacher freak outs. It's like, this is a format where we have Wasteland and Show and Tell, and you're mad about opposition agent. Like, just settle your shit.
All right, this is probably a great point to wrap things up, and we just showed that you can apply the same sort of things that we're talking about today with going a little bit to bigger to formats outside of just Legacy. So this isn't just a, one format, one trick pony episode. You can take this same theory and apply it elsewhere. Do either of you have any closing thoughts here?
Nope, I just ranted good and hard to end the episode.
All right, well, let's go ahead and call it here. I hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you again. Well,